The whole mess started with one offhand remark from Jimmy Haslam that lit the fuse on what would become one of the most talked-about quarterback controversies of the year. It wasn't even some fiery, obvious insult. It was the way he said it. The way he casually brushed off a reporter's question about Shedeur Sanders with that half-smirk. Like the rookie was little more than a footnote in Cleveland's quarterback room. When you're a fifth-round rookie, you already live in a world where every rep, every snap, every word you speak is weighed against veterans who have years in the league. You fight tooth and nail for an ounce of credibility. But to have the owner of your team publicly minimize your role before you've even had a chance to prove yourself, that hits different. If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed. And it didn't just hit Shedeur, it hit his family, especially his father. Deion Sanders, Coach Prime himself, isn't one to let a shot like that go unanswered. Within 24 hours, he was in front of cameras, voice sharp, eyes locked, making it clear. His son wasn't here to be anyone's afterthought. He called out what he saw as a deeply ingrained problem in the NFL, the quickness to sideline young black quarterbacks, to demand to be humble and quiet, while their white counterparts are allowed swagger and confidence without question. He didn't mince words. He didn't hide his frustration. And in doing so, he threw gasoline on a fire the Browns front office was desperately hoping would just smolder out. Behind the scenes, things were just as tense. Multiple reports from inside camp suggested Shedeur's reps were being rationed, not because of performance issues, but to keep the peace in the quarterback room. Veteran egos are fragile, and the Browns were wary of letting a rookie shine too brightly, too soon. That strategy might have worked if Shedeur was average. He wasn't. Every limited snap he got, he made count. Precision throws, perfect reads, poise that looked less like rookie luck and more like, I've been doing this my whole life. And that's exactly where the suspicion started to grow. Was this about protecting the depth chart or about keeping him in a box? You could see on the faces of younger players, guys drafted in the later rounds, undrafted free agents fighting for their own sliver of recognition. They started to gravitate toward him. Maybe it was his confidence. Maybe it was the way he carried himself without bitterness, never trashing the vets or the coaches in the locker room. Whatever it was, by the third week of camp, he had a little army of quiet supporters in orange and brown. The media, of course, had a field day. Instead of celebrating his calm leadership, they twisted it into arrogance. Instead of pointing out his film study habits and extra hours on the practice field, they fixated on his jewelry, his social media presence, his famous father. Cocky rookie, the headline said, needs to earn it. As if he hadn't been earning it in every single rep he was allowed to take. And that's where Deion came in swinging again. On live television, he called out the double standard. He rattled off the names of quarterbacks who strutted into the league with bravado and were praised for leadership presence. He asked why his son's confidence was read as cockiness instead of readiness. He accused the NFL of burying quarterbacks who didn't fit the old yes, sir, no, sir mold. It wasn't just about Shedeur anymore. It was about the entire way the league handled young, outspoken talent. Now, the Browns had a problem. The public pressure was building. Social media was full of clips from practice, showing Shedeur hitting throws that seasoned pros sometimes miss. Fans were asking why he wasn't getting more looks. Inside the building, those quiet whispers from teammates had turned into louder conversations. Eventually, even the front office couldn't ignore it. So they gave him more first-team reps. That's when things really started to shift. With the starters, he wasn't just good, he was better. The timing with the receivers clicked instantly. His command in the huddle was unshakable. He wasn't just executing plays. He was adjusting protections, calling audibles, and doing it with the kind of presence that made guys listen. This wasn't just rookie getting his shot. This was rookie proving he belongs here. By the time the preseason opener rolled around, Kevin Stefanski announced that Shedeur would be starting. The decision was wrapped in coach speak. Something about wanting to see him in game situations, but everyone knew what it really meant. He had forced their hand. That game against the Carolina Panthers is the one that flipped the script entirely. The highlight moment? A 40-yard touchdown strike that didn't just look good, it looked fearless. Pocket collapsing, pressure in his face. Shedeur planted and launched a perfect spiral down the sideline, hitting his receiver in stride for 6. The stadium erupted. Even some of the Panthers sideline players shook their heads like, yeah, that's a throw. After that, the post-game presser felt different. Stefanski was careful with his words, but you could hear the change. He showed good command. He was confident. We'll keep evaluating. Translation: this kid might be more ready than we thought. The Browns' quarterback situation, which had been straightforward on paper, suddenly became complicated. Deshaun Watson was still the guy they paid heavily for, but Sanders had just made it impossible to treat him like a long-term project. The fans knew it. The players knew it. And, whether they'd admit it or not, the coaches knew it too. For Shedeur, though, the most important part wasn't the headlines or the sudden wave of public support. It was proving to himself and everyone watching that he could stand in that pocket and deliver when the stakes were real, that he could take all the noise, the doubts from management, the media digs, even his own owner's dismissive words, and turn them into fuel. In the weeks that followed, the Browns building felt unsettled. There were meetings, long ones, rumors about heated exchanges between front office and coaching staff. Some said the owner was still reluctant to embrace the idea of a rookie challenging the depth chart this soon. Others claimed Barry, the GM, was quietly pushing for more opportunities for Sanders to see meaningful action. And through all of it, Shedeur stayed locked in. No cryptic social media posts. No public jabs. Just football, in a league obsessed with narratives. He refused to play that game. He let the throws speak for him. Deion, meanwhile, wasn't letting up. Every chance he got, he reminded people of the road his son had traveled, how he'd been coached hard from day one, how he'd been prepared for pressure before he ever touched an NFL ball. He made sure no one could frame this as some lucky fluke. What the Browns didn't realize at first was that this wasn't just about managing a quarterback competition. This was about managing a cultural shift inside their own building and across the league. The days of quietly sitting a talented rookie just because were fading fast. Fans wanted to see the best player on the field, and Shedeur Sanders had just made a strong case that he was one of them. What the Browns didn't realize at first was that this wasn't just about managing a quarterback competition. This was about managing a cultural shift inside their own building and across the league. The days of quietly sitting a talented rookie just because were fading fast. Fans wanted to see the best player on the field, and Shedeur Sanders had just made a strong case that he was one of them. By the end of preseason, the Browns had a choice to make: stick to the safe plan and ride with their veteran, or take the leap of the rookie who had just survived and thrived under more pressure than most players face in a full season. Whatever they chose, one thing was already clear. The moment Jimmy Haslam downplayed Shedeur Sanders, he set in motion a chain of events that he could no longer control. What was supposed to be a casual brush-off had turned into a rallying cry. And no matter how hard they tried to slow him down, Shedeur kept stepping up, proving that resilience, skill, and poise will always cut through politics. Because in the NFL, talent eventually forces its way to the surface. And Shedeur Sanders wasn't just surfacing, he was breaking through. The aftermath of that preseason opener didn't fade away in a day or two. It became the drumbeat that carried through the rest of camp. Cleveland suddenly found itself living in two different realities. In one, the official team stance was calm, patient, and cautious. Shedeur was developing well. The staff was pleased with his progress, but the depth chart was set. In the other reality, the one playing out on talk radio, social media, and in the locker room, Sanders was already the guy in the minds of a growing number of fans and teammates. The divide was obvious. Walking through Berea during the final week of August, you could spot it. There were the veterans who still wore their loyalty to the established order like a badge, guys who'd been around long enough to know how fragile stability can be, who didn't want a QB controversy ripping the team apart. And then there were the younger players, the ones who had bonded with Shedeur during the long summer days of camp, who saw him as a spark that could carry the Browns to something bigger. It wasn't hostile, not yet, but you could feel the tension humming just beneath the surface. Deion's shadow over Berea. Deion Sanders didn't physically show up at Browns camp, but his presence might as well have been a looming banner over practice field. Every time Shedeur took a rep, there was a lingering awareness that his father was somewhere, watching, ready to speak his mind if he felt the slightest whiff of disrespect. Some in the organization saw that as a distraction. Others, especially the rookies, saw it as a shield. Coach Prime had the kind of platform that could keep certain NFL politics from swallowing a young player whole. If someone tried to quietly bury Shedeur on the bench, they knew the headlines would come fast and loud. The irony? The more the Browns tried to keep things measured and in-house, the more the public conversation exploded. Inside the film room, one of the most telling moments of the preseason happened not on the field, but in the film room. The offense was reviewing clips from the Panthers game, and Sanders' 40-yard touchdown was queued up. Before Stefanski could even start breaking it down, a veteran lineman in the back of the room muttered, "That's a starter throw." The room cracked into quiet laughter. Stefanski didn't acknowledge it, but everyone knew they'd heard it. Moments like that are where team culture starts to tip. Jimmy Haslam stands his ground. Haslam didn't issue any walkback of his earlier comments. In fact, when pressed about them a week later, he doubled down in a more diplomatic way. "We're excited about Shedeur, but this is the NFL. You earn everything over time," he said. It sounded reasonable, but it was the same kind of phrasing that had been used for decades to justify keeping rookies in the shadows until it was politically convenient to let them shine. And for Deion, that was exactly the problem. He didn't go nuclear this time, but he made sure to slide in a pointed remark during an unrelated interview. You don't put Ferrari in the garage just because you're used to driving a pickup. Everyone knew who he meant. The locker room starts choosing sides. By the time the final preseason game rolled around, it was clear this wasn't just a rookie making noise. It was a rookie forcing a decision, and decisions divide locker rooms. Receivers and tight ends were openly lobbying for more reps with Sanders. They loved how quickly the ball came out, how his timing on deep routes gave them a real shot to make plays. The defense respected him, too. His calm in the pocket against the first-team pass rush had earned nods from even the most hard-nosed veterans. Still, there were players who bristled at the idea of a rookie leapfrogging the established starter, not necessarily because of Watson himself, but because of the precedent it set. If the depth chart could be disrupted this easily, it made everyone feel replaceable. The fans take over the narrative. What the Browns couldn't control was the fan reaction. Clips of Shedeur's throws were racking up millions of views online. The local radio call of his touchdown to Cooper was being replayed on highlight shows across the country. Season ticket holders started calling into talk shows, saying they'd rather watch the rookie take his lumps and sit through another year of uninspired, predictable offense. Merchandise sales for Sanders' jersey spiked. In some team stores, his number was outselling the starting quarterbacks. It wasn't just hype, it was momentum. And momentum is a dangerous thing to try to stop. Shedeur's response, silence and sweat. Through all of this, Shedeur kept the same routine. No cryptic Instagram captions. No subtle digs in interviews. He smiled, answered every question politely, and went back to work. Teammates noticed how often he stayed after practice, not just with receivers, but with the offensive line. He'd stand behind them, watch the protections, and ask questions about their reads. He wasn't just learning his job. He was learning theirs. That's how you build trust in an NFL locker room. It's also how you quietly dismantle the rookie needs more time narrative. The second big statement. If the Panthers game was the moment Shedeur announced himself, the final preseason game was when he made himself unavoidable. Against a blitz-heavy defense, he shredded them with quick outs, checkdowns, and surgical throws over the middle. It wasn't flashy like the deep ball of Cooper. It was better. It was proof he could run an NFL offense with efficiency and composure. No turnovers. No panic under pressure. Just clean, winning football. By the final whistle, the whispers weren't, maybe next year. They were, how do you keep this guy off the field? Stefanski's dilemma. Kevin Stefanski now had the hardest job in Cleveland. Start Sanders, and you risk alienating a veteran quarterback who's supposed to be your franchise face. Sit him, and you risk losing the fans, the locker room, and maybe even your job if the offense sputters out of the gate. Behind closed doors, the meetings were heated. Barry, the GM, reportedly pushed for a merit-based decision. Haslam, still wary of what a rookie-led team could mean for his investment, leaned toward the safer political play. Stefanski was stuck in the middle, trying to keep the entire situation from imploding before week 1. Deion turns up the heat, again. If the Browns thought Coach Prime was done talking, they were wrong. Right before roster cut-down day, he dropped another interview, this time on National Sports Network, where he laid out plainly, "If my son was out there looking lost, I'd say he needs to sit. But you've seen the tape. He's ready. And if you're afraid of what happens when he plays, maybe you should be asking yourself why." It was a challenge, not just to the Browns, but to the league as a whole. The decision day. When the depth chart was released, Shedeur was officially listed as QB2. It was a compromise on paper. Watson was still the starter. But the leash had suddenly gotten much, much shorter. And everyone knew it. The Browns could spin it however they wanted, but the truth was simple. The rookie had forced his way into the conversation so completely that one bad quarter from the starter could bring the chance raining down from the stands. The long game begins. The first few weeks of the season would tell the rest of the story. But in many ways, the real victory had already happened. Shedeur had gone from afterthought to franchise-altering variable in less than 2 months. He'd weathered public doubt, internal politics, and the weight of carrying a famous last name in a league that loves to tear down anything that rises too quickly. And he'd done it without ever losing control of the one thing that mattered most, his game. All right, let's step right back into this, because the moment Shedeur Sanders' name sat there on the depth chart as QB2, the Browns had unknowingly opened a door they wouldn't be able to shut. From the outside, it looked like a simple piece of roster news. From the inside, it was a live wire running through every meeting room and locker corner in Berea. The first sign of a shift. Week 1 was against a division rival. The plan was clear. Watson starts, Shedeur watches, everyone stays calm. That lasted exactly 2.5 quarters. Watson wasn't bad, but he wasn't inspiring either. The offense sputtered, missing throws and settling for field goals. Somewhere in the third quarter, a low murmur started in the stands. It was faint at first, but by the next stalled drive, it was unmistakable. Shedeur, Shedeur. The chants rolled across the stadium like a slow-building storm. Watson stayed in. Stefanski didn't blink. But the moment was real, and everybody in that building knew it. Locker room conversations. By midweek, conversations in the locker room were less guarded. You had receivers openly saying in interviews that Shedeur just had a different timing with certain routes. You had defensive guys talking about how hard it was to rattle him in practice. And you had veterans telling media off the record that the kid was already one of the smartest players in the room. It's one thing for fans to demand a change. It's another when the guys who have to line up with you start nudging for it too. The meeting behind closed doors. The turning point came after week 2, a narrow win that should have been comfortable but wasn't. Word leaked that Barry, Stefanski, and Haslam had a late-night meeting. Nobody knows every word that was said, but multiple sources claim Barry pressed his case. Sanders was ready, and the offense needed a spark. Haslam reportedly pushed back, saying they couldn't risk upsetting the structure this early in the season. It was politics versus production, and the only thing keeping the scale from tipping was the fact that the Browns had yet to lose. Shedeur's patience, or maybe his strategy. The most fascinating part? Shedeur didn't play the impatient rookie. He didn't campaign through the media. He didn't throw passive-aggressive comments into interviews. He simply kept preparing like he was starting next Sunday. And that might have been his sharpest move yet, because everyone noticed. The coaching staff saw a young QB who could handle being a backup without sulking. The players saw a guy who stayed ready without letting ego blow up the room. The fans saw someone who wasn't trying to ride his famous last name to instant stardom. He was earning it. The injury that changed everything. It happened in week 4. Watson took a shot in the third quarter. Nothing career-ending, but enough to pull him for the rest of the game. The Browns were up by 3. The defense was bending, and they needed drives to chew clock. Sanders jogged onto the field like it was just another Thursday practice. No nerves, no jitters, just business. What followed was exactly the kind of performance that changes a career. 3 drives, 2 of them ending in touchdowns, one in a long field goal. He hit tight throws into zone windows, kept his eyes downfield under pressure, and, most importantly, controlled the tempo. The Browns won by 17. By Monday, Stefanski was at the podium saying they'd evaluate the starter for next week. The leash? Gone. The media frenzy. You couldn't turn on sports TV without seeing the debate. Is it Sanders' job now? Analysts who trashed him before the draft were now calling him the real deal. Old footage from college, games, interviews, even workouts, were suddenly resurfacing, rebranded as proof they'd seen this coming. And then, inevitably, Deion dropped his mic moment. He went on a national show and said, "I told y'all, I don't need to be right. I need you to stop acting shocked when my son proves he's built for this." The clip went viral before lunch, the first official start. When the Browns announced Sanders as a starter for Week 5, it was framed as due to injury, but everyone knew this was the trial run. Play well, and the job could be as for good. It was on the road, against a defense that thrived on confusing young quarterbacks. The crowd was loud, the weather was ugly, and the first quarter was a grind. But then something clicked. In the second quarter, Sanders rolled right on a broken play, motioned to his receiver mid-scramble, and dropped a 27-yard dart between 2 defenders. That single throw seemed to rip the lid off the game. He finished with 281 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no turnovers. The Browns won by double digits. The locker room flipped. That's when the shift became official. Players who'd been hesitant started voicing full support. Leaders on both sides of the ball were calling him QB1 to his face. No veteran wants to be in, healthy enough to play, but watching a younger guy win the building over. The Browns framed it as week to week based on performance. Translation: as long as Sanders kept winning, the job was his. The rise of the brand. Off the field, the timing couldn't have been better. His jersey sales spiked again, national commercials started calling, and he was suddenly in weekly highlight reels. The narrative had flipped from rookie being held back to rookie rescuing a team. And unlike some players who get overwhelmed by sudden fame, Sanders used it. He doubled down on film study, kept working with his receivers after hours, and made sure his public image matched the quiet, focused energy he showed in the locker room.